Welcome to Fintech Decoded, a podcast which is hosted by Musheer and myself. We're doing a look back on the year that was 2024 and a look forward to the year that will be in 2025. And we are glad and honored to have with us Mr. Ali, who is the chairman of Association of Fintechs in Kenya. He's a board member of the Africa Fintech Network. He's an investor and coach to many fintechs, and he is giving us his time to be able to tell you all how Africa has performed in 2024. And he's actually sitting on a beach thinking about his vacation, and we're taking his time today. So honored to have you, Ali.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Monica, for inviting me for this podcast. And you're right. I'm sitting in beautiful sunny Watamu down at the coast of Kenya. Happy to have to take a short break from family during this holiday season to have this important conversation. I mean, fintech is sort of in my blood now. So when you guys reached out to have this conversation, I jumped at the opportunity.
Excellent. So glad to have you. Thank you so much. So without wasting more time away from your vacation and making sure that we have an amazing conversation about what's actually happened in 2024 in Africa, let's start. So Ali, what are some of the most significant fintech innovations in Africa in this last year, and how have they impacted the fintech market?
So I think, Monica, would you allow me to sort of rephrase your question, because there's so much that has really happened in Africa as far as fintech is concerned, from regulatory to investments and growth to innovations, to market conditions. Would that be okay? I mean, if I
absolutely
jump,
by all means, yes.
Yeah. So if we look at how 2024 evolved, several countries made major strides in fintech policy and regulation. Rwanda announced its first fintech strategy paper, 3-year strategy paper, a couple of weeks ago. Nigeria's made major strides in fintech policy and regulation. And Nigeria has been interesting because on one side, regulators are really clamping down hard on fintechs, on any malpractices. But on the other side, they're opening up the market pretty well when it comes to crypto. The first crypto exchange regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Nigeria was licensed this year. So that's a major stride. South Africa, when it comes to crypto, is probably way ahead. They have licensed more than 60 plus fintech, crypto-related fintechs. In Kenya, the Association of Fintechs, of which I'm the chair, the Financial Sector Deepening, which is a nonprofit that works to deepen financial services across Africa, and the Kenya Bankers Association launched their open finance conversation. Hopefully in 2025, we shall see this expanded to conversations with policymakers and regulators. In Nigeria, again, the Naira has had a bit of a bump, but we are starting to see that starting to happen to get into mainstream. The ECB in Ghana is moving beyond the test phase. So interesting conversations going on. When it comes to investments, we have seen a 13th, we have seen a major reversal of investment. Only 22% compared to a couple of years back. We there has been a significant drop in funding. And honestly, Monica, I'm not so sure that this is necessarily a bad thing. I think we are going to start seeing fintechs focusing more on P2P, which is path to profitability, as opposed to focusing more on funding. And I think that's a good thing. Despite this, we have seen the number of startups raising more than $1 million have actually increased. So the investment climate when it comes to fintechs is a mixed basket. And my sense is that we are going to start focusing more on business fundamentals. So in terms of just numbers, in Q1 of 2024, African fintechs raised approximately $340 million, which is a significant drop from $1.1 billion in the first half of 2023 and $1.5 billion in the first half of 2022. Basically, this represents a decline of 70% year on year. If we take a historical context, the peak of fintech investment occurred in 2021 when VC funding reached over $5 billion, with fintech accounting for 63% of that total. That's amazing. When we're looking at regional backups, breakdown, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, South Africa sort of take up the bulk of this investment, about 90% in some cases. So let's look at, sorry, go on.
I was going to say that this looks very much in line with what we are seeing globally and specifically also in parts of Asia, which are very emerging. But have you seen any new country emerge in terms of taking a lot of the fintech funding, apart from the top big four that you just mentioned?
Well, so next, as we call them, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, and South Africa still remain a significant market and majority funding and the biggest fintech markets. But countries like Ghana, Senegal, Uganda are starting to emerge as, tier two fintech markets. And my hope and prayer is that other countries will start becoming as important as the big four.
Amazing. And any specific fintech vertical categories, like most of the money has always gone towards payments, lending, which are the flavor of the season. Is there any category that you see emerging?
That continues to be the case, but we are starting to see wealth management, wealth tech becoming an important aspect. Agri-tech, less with lots of fintech conversations, is starting to become super important. My sense is that agri-tech is going to be one of the most important, sort of fintech segments as we move along in 2025 and beyond. Not to forget climate investment, climate tech. See, a lot of these segments have fintech embedded into them. And one of the trends that is very important in Africa is that most fintech engagements are driven by mobile money. Mobile money is sort of the top layer, the top rails when it comes to fintech engagement across Africa. Are we going to see that changing? Possibly, with the emergence of payment platforms like the Pan-African Payment Settlement System. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we come to Future Outlook 2025 and beyond.
Excellent. This is such a great rundown, and I love the coinage P2P, which is path to profitability. So I was quite, so this is a new one. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
So
I'm very keen. I'm very keen that we actually start thinking about, how do we ensure that we become less dependent on
yes,
foreign funding and become more resilient in first local funding across Africa and also focusing more on business fundamentals. So that's not to say, Monica, that I am against foreign funding. I'm not. I am just saying that we need a healthy mix of both local and foreign funding.
and you mentioned a very important thing, resilience. I think all the world is
Resilience.
moving towards that, where we need a
Absolutely.
safety net, and every country wants to be resilient to the economic and other policy changes happening all across the world.
Absolutely.
This is
Absolutely.
wonderful. And actually coming now to regulation, because that is the more one of the most important and critical areas for all fintechs to operate in. What are some of the regulatory changes in 2024 which have influenced the industry in Africa?
So let me start with my home country, Kenya, first. We are seeing a concerted effort by regulators, especially the Central Bank of Kenya, to bring fintechs more squarely into the fold of regulators. That is not necessarily a bad thing. I think, okay, so, scratch that. I believe that policy and regulation, well structured, well executed, is actually a great thing for any industry, not just fintech. The concern of many of us in the fintech ecosystem, not just Kenya, but across Africa. Now, I'm wearing my Africa Fintech Network hat. The concern is that there is a feeling, right or wrong, that many regulators are constrained, resource-wise, people and money, to actually regulate this super vibrant fintech ecosystem. And there is also a concern, which I must say that many regulators and policymakers are starting to do a lot in terms of bridging the gap of understanding what fintech is and which fintech segments are and how do they fit into the financial services ecosystem. Now, one of the things that we are advocating for is a specific fintech desk in these regulatory offices across Africa. Now, I must say, if I pick a country that has very clear in your face that there is no wishy-washiness in terms of who is responsible for fintech regulation in the central bank, I would say that Ghana stands out for me. Ghana has a specific fintech director of innovation, a director of fintech and innovation. And that guy, we know, his office is responsible. Would love to see the same kind of thing across Africa. Now, that's not to say others don't have a fintech office or they don't regulate fintechs the way they should. What we're saying is the importance of clarity in regulation is very important. When you know who you are talking to, when you know who you are addressing, when you know the letter you are sending to a central bank is being sent to somebody specific on fintech, it removes a lot of unnecessary concerns. That's not the case in many regulatory offices across Africa. That's a fact. I mean, and Monica, I'm happy to be wrong on this one.
I would agree with you.
Because if I'm wrong, then it means that we have moved in the right direction. But I doubt that I'm wrong. We really need to nail this so that we have clarity. Clarity is so critical when it comes to these issues.
Very interesting. And do you see that the regulators have been having and engaging in a dialogue continuously with fintechs, trying to understand their concerns and trying to also create regulations which are in line with innovative practices across the region?
So look, I mean, if you'd asked me this even 2 years ago, I'll be probably talking very different. But 2024 has been a year of many policymakers and regulators coming to terms that this fintech issue is here to stay. How do we navigate this monster called fintech? So there's been great strides. There's been lots of movement. What I am saying is we need to move further.
You make a great point here, because I think this is exactly what fintechs want. And at the same time, regulators are also trying to move forward with fintechs, but it becomes difficult for them to walk the path fast enough. So you're absolutely right.
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Another big question which our listeners would love to understand, keeping in mind all this fintech funding that is coming to Africa, is how have the consumers changed? Has the behavior been something which you've seen go up and down or change specifically after COVID? Or is there something specific in 2024 that seems to be a highlight in terms of how consumer behavior has changed in Africa?
Yeah, I mean, there has been significant consumer behavior. And this has been mainly because of the maturity of the ecosystem. The ecosystem is becoming mature and consumers are demanding more. So, increased adoption of digital financial tools is one. So, for example, the average African fintech user now has 3 to 4 fintech apps or financial services apps, with this number expected to rise. Over 90% of consumers are now using some form of digital payment, which is a significant increase from previous years. Mobile money continues to be a cornerstone of African fintech, as I mentioned earlier, with substantial advancements embedded now into mobile money, remittances, merchant payments, and micro savings. One of the most interesting things that is the African fintech ecosystem is that sometimes we make a lot of noise about the dominance of some of these mobile money players, like my country, Kenya, the dominance of M-Pesa. I mean, 98.5% of all mobile money payments are through the M-Pesa ecosystem. So, I mean, really, that's dominance. But even as we are making that noise, we are also appreciating how pivotal some of these companies have become or are in the development of the fintech ecosystem. For example, Safaricom, which is the owner of M-Pesa, has this open API platform called Daraja. So Daraja is the API platform. Daraja is Swahili for bridge. I mean, quite an apt name, right, Monica? Now, 90,000 developers across the markets that M-Pesa operates in Africa plug onto that Daraja platform. I am not talking about end consumers. I'm talking about developers. 90,000 developers plug onto that Daraja platform. Now, you tell me that's sort of, I mean, we must appreciate what some of these companies have done. even as we castigate them and talk to them and make sure that they don't abuse their market power, we must say, hey guys, well done. This is fantastic work. And it's not just Safaricom. MTN they have an API platform. They are starting to plug into the whole financial services ecosystem. Orange Money, Airtel Money. Now, there's another aspect of the ecosystem that we are starting to see that is going to fundamentally change how we engage with the ecosystem in 2025 going forward. The two big payment companies in the world, and I haven't even started talking about Union Pay in China. I see them starting to get into Africa. I'm talking about Visa and MasterCard. These two giants are on an arms race to dominate or to partner with mobile money players, either investing in them or strategic investments and embedding the mobile money ecosystem into their ecosystem and vice versa. It's going to be super interesting how the integration of mobile money in Africa into the incumbent card payments and remittances and merchant payments and all these other payments that are plugged into these big global payment companies, MasterCard and Visa, how we integrate and how they work with mobile money will probably sort of define how they work with other mobile companies across the world. So Africa is, again, at the forefront of innovation when it comes to how these two different payment ecosystems work and how they continuously integrate. So, for example, if I go into my M-Pesa app, there's M-Pesa Global. M-Pesa Global gives me access to probably more than 40 countries in the world that I can receive money directly into my M-Pesa wallet, excuse me, or I can send to somebody's either mobile wallet or bank account within minutes. Yeah, so this is quite interesting, and the ramifications are going to be quite interesting to see going forward. The other area that I think is starting to play a big role is a shift towards embedded finance. We are seeing financial services being increasingly integrated into non-financial platforms across sectors like agriculture, transportation, health, and hospitality. Yeah, so this is quite interesting. Pezesha, which is a fintech in Kenya that focuses on MSME lending, is in the forefront of embedded finance, doing this lending through third parties. They have a platform. They also have a KYC ecosystem. It's going to be quite interesting to see how this evolves. And remember, embedded finance goes hand in hand with open finance. And already quite a number of countries, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, are starting to pay close attention to open finance innovation from a policy and regulatory perspective.
I love how you mentioned about these two ecosystems and coming together and embedded finance, simply because I've been hearing this for quite a while now. I think consumers are also becoming extremely intelligent, and at the same time, they also know how to interact with different ecosystems. And I think that's been one major change that we are seeing everywhere as well. I think
Right.
it's very far removed that you can think that a consumer will not be able to adapt to digital. And I think that's where the testament lies. Amazing stuff. This is really amazing.
100%.
And this is so cool because we always think of Africa as a nation, like, but the various nuances that you have spoken with us about, I'm sure this will be very, very interesting for
So,
our listeners.
absolutely. So, Monica, I always love to joke that Africa is not one country. And that even for us Africans,
Yes.
sometimes we seem to forget that. It's 54
Yes.
different countries with different cultures, different policy and regulatory frameworks,
Yes.
different national payment ecosystems. So, when somebody tells me, what's your Africa strategy? I'm like, which part of Africa or which country in Africa? Yeah.
Yes.
So obviously there are similarities, yeah, but they're also very different. From a fintech perspective, let me just give you
Mm.
a flavor of how this difference
Mm.
manifests itself.
Mm.
Kenya, when it comes to how mobile money is regulated, Kenya has a telco-led strategy, which basically means the policymakers and regulators focus more on how the telcos operate and how
Mm.
they work towards embedding into the financial services ecosystem. In Nigeria, it's bank-led. Mobile money is bank-led. Until very recently, Nigeria just simply refused for telcos to offer mobile money. They just said you are not going to operate in the financial services ecosystem. Hence, the lagging of mobile money in Nigeria. They decided that the NIBS, as it's called, the Nigeria Interbank Settlement Scheme, will take the forefront when it comes to payments and stuff like that. So there are positives and negatives on that. Positives in Kenya is that the proliferation of mobile money made financial inclusion. We hit our targets on financial inclusion many years ago. We are now sitting at about 89% on financial inclusion. Nigeria, financial inclusion grew much slower because of that. Because banks were like, we already have a payment ecosystem working. I mean, big deal. We don't care about mobile money, right? But then in Kenya, you have a situation where you have a potential systemic risk, where you have one player that is so dominant that we can't ignore it anymore. Right? So there are policy and regulatory measures to correct that. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's taken us to where we are. So how do we correct the potential systemic risk? In Nigeria, what they did then is a couple of years ago, they decided they will license payment banks. So instead of calling them mobile money, they call them payment banks. All right. And then they licensed the telcos and other fintechs under the payment banks regulatory framework. And all of a sudden, we are starting to see the growth of mobile money in Nigeria hit the roof. So the jury's still out on whether the Kenyan model worked better or is working better or the Nigerian model works better. I think there's a case for either. There is a case for saying let's continue to use these policy and regulatory tools to ensure that there's no systemic risk in one particular market. And on the other side, we need financial inclusion to hit 100%. How do we ensure that we continue to promote payment banks? Do we add more features into the payment bank license? For example, payment banks are not allowed to to lend. They're not allowed to receive deposits. Is there a case for that to change where I sit? The answer is an absolute yes. How do you then address the policy and the policymakers and regulators' concern of potential systemic risk where one big player becomes too big? Like in Nigeria, that could be MTN.
This is fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating. This is where I think, Ali, this is why these conversations become so tough to ring fence within a specific time frame. Because when you start looking at the ramifications, these are massive and
massive ramifications. Yeah,
absolutely. But actually and this is a great segue into going into 2025 for us, because going forward with what you just explained to us, what will be some of the key fintech trends and innovations that we should be watching out for?
So for me, when I look at 2025, I noted down a couple of things. Number one, I see the doubling down of the big global payment companies in terms of ensuring that they play a bigger role in the national payment ecosystem across Africa. Visa, MasterCard, Credit, Union Credit. I see them doubling down on that. And you can see by the activities, Visa has committed $1 billion to fintech startups across Africa. And they have this accelerator program going on. MasterCard is focused more on partnerships, on fintechs, buying into payment companies, buying into mobile money companies. MasterCard has actually done that more than Visa. Visa, on the other hand, is focused more on investments into the big fintech companies. For example, Flutterwave, InterSwitch. One of the things that I see 2025 being very interesting is the coming or the going live of the Pan-African Payment Settlement Scheme. That is definitely going to be interesting. That, if you look at how that may affect intra-Africa trade, one of the biggest problems with intra-Africa trade today is that if Ali Hussein based in Nairobi wants to trade with somebody in Nigeria, I must find dollars, or the person in Nigeria must find dollars to pay me, or for him for me to pay him. The PAPS ecosystem seeks to change that, seeks to ensure that we can actually trade with our own currencies. Now, if that hits mainstream, Monica, that's going to be a game changer. That's going to at least double intra-Africa trade, which currently sits between 16 and 18%. Africa only trades with itself 16% of total trade in Africa. That's a share. That's a big share. And the biggest issue is this issue of hard currency. So if we can address that issue through the PAPS ecosystem, that would be great. The other one I see being a very big conversation is the collaboration between policymakers and regulators across Africa through the Africa Free Trade Zone. The Africa FinTech Network has been having conversations with the African Union to make sure that we have a passporting system for fintech licensing. So fintech XYZ has a license in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Why do I have to take a full year to get another license in Nigeria or Ghana? Yeah. Why can't we have an open platform of information where I can then just passport? Obviously, it will not take the same day, but can we at least take maximum a month or two instead of a year or 2 years? That's how long sometimes fintechs take to actually get licensed. Yeah, I mean, that's a shame in this continent of ours that we claim to have political integration through the African Union. Yeah, so we need to change that. The other trend I see gaining momentum is, of course, AI integration in financial services. Now, I know some people still think AI is a fad. Hey, Monica, I mean, I can over the last couple of months, the integration of artificial intelligence in my day-to-day work has become so embedded. I'm asking myself, how did I used to do it without these AI tools? Yeah, so in financial services, that's a given. Yeah, AI-powered credit scoring and fraud detection, for example. Yeah, predictive analytics using artificial intelligence is going to be more mainstream. Sustainability and green tech is going to be another, green fintech is going to be another big one. We're already starting to see major investment into green tech, and that's not going to change. That's going to increase. The other one is open banking or open finance and API fast infrastructure. It's going to be super, super critical. When it comes to regulatory technology, I see a major need between SupTech, which is supervisory technology, and RegTech, which is regulatory technology, meeting together through APIs, so that reporting becomes not onerous, not something that you have to do every month or every quarter. It becomes real time with integration of these two technologies. And that's not something that is rocket science anymore. These technologies are available. So we just need to be open-minded, if I may be allowed to use that term, and open enough to integrate these technologies so that regulators can find more time for strategic stuff as opposed to just regulating fintech and banks. Back to you, Mike.
This is amazing because Ali, what you've said about RegTech and supervisory tech is really critical, and also about licensing. I think this is one common problem that we hear everywhere because fintechs are trying to go global, and it becomes a huge problem for them to seek licenses everywhere they go. If there is a way for us to be able to manage this better, I think it helps with innovation, not being impeded
100%.
by paperwork. So that would be
100%.
super. Excellent. These are excellent points. And actually, you mentioned a little bit about collaboration, but I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive. How do you see the global fintech collaboration actually evolving in this year, in the coming year, specifically given that many companies want to set up shop in Africa, which are global in nature? And you mentioned some of them.
Look, the good thing, Monica, is that we already have organizations that are working towards that. We have the International Digital Association that is bringing together different ecosystem players across the world, mostly in the global south. We have the Africa FinTech Network that is collaborating with other regional fintech associations across Africa, Latin America, Europe, America. So we are starting to see the collaboration starting to happen at private sector level, and then starting to bring together policymakers and regulators. We have another organization called GIFT, Global FinTech Association, that is also working towards bringing different players across the globe to engage, to consult, and to work together. You have organizations like African Nenda that is working with policymakers, regulators, and fintech players across Africa to harmonize the ecosystem, help harmonize policy and regulatory frameworks, help harmonize fintech strategies across Africa. The momentum it's actually heartening to me to see some of these things happening. They are almost taking a mind of their own because there's a huge need. There is a need. So if a fintech in Kenya wants to start engaging in South America, they know who to speak with. They know who to engage with. If a fintech in South America wants to kick off operations in Nigeria, they know who to talk to. They know who to engage with. And that's what globalization is all about.
Ali, talking about this and taking it one step further, so if we talk about the regulatory changes as well, how do you see that evolving? And is it going to be something specific for a few countries that may impact the region, or a region-wide initiative which might impact countries? How do you see that progressing?
So from an African perspective, I see that policymakers and regulators are talking more through the African Union and through the Africa Free Trade Zone. My hope and prayer is that the smaller countries in Africa shall not be left behind. We hope that that doesn't happen. One of the key issues, though, Monica, is always political will. Do we have political will? Where there is a will, there is a way. And we are already seeing how the execution of the Pan-African payment settlement system is starting to work. So there is hope. There is huge hope. But hope alone is not going to take us there. Action is what is super, super critical. And we are seeing action on the ground. We are seeing action on the ground. We want to just make sure that the political will from the political leaders is actually there and takes it to the final mile.
And that's interesting. And the last question on this one is, what opportunities or challenges do you foresee for fintech specifically in 2025 in Africa?
So first things off, despite our huge conversation around mobile money, only about 10 to 15% of payments in Africa are digital payments. So even as we say payments is saturated, I mean, we have 85% of Africans who are still not engaging in digital payments. So that opportunity continues to be there. That's one. Two, the other opportunity is on RegTech and SupTech, how these two technologies come together. There are going to be some entrepreneurs out there who really focus on this opportunity who are going to make it big. The other one for me is wealth tech or wealth management. That's big. And the opportunity around how mobile money becomes crucial to this is going to be important. We're already starting to see micro investments through products like Mali in Kenya becoming super, super important through the Shilingi Fund. Shilingi is a shilling in Swahili with the Standard Chartered Bank. We are starting to see that the fact that people have small incomes do not mean that they do not aspire to save. They can save if the technologies are there to assist them to save the small bits that they have. last but not least for me is there's a huge opportunity for Islamic tech in Africa. Islamic fintech is possibly the most important stuff that has yet to happen in Africa. 53% of Africans are Muslim. At least 40% of those are craving for an Islamic financial services product. There you have it, Monica.
Is amazing. That's such a good breakdown of the opportunities that exist. And I'm sure that everybody who's listening in would love to be able to tap into this amazing, vast population, as well as, of course, the opportunity areas that you have just spoken about. This has been an absolutely riveting conversation, Ali. I can't thank you enough, specifically that now that I also know that you're on vacation. The depth and the amount that we have explored in these last 50 minutes has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation.
It's my pleasure, Monica. It's my pleasure. I mean, we are talking about 1.4 billion Africans. The thing that everybody must appreciate and understand is that we are not homogeneous, but we are 1.4 billion Africans. So they are brands that are Pan-African. So we must study what those brands have done to make sure that they become household names across Africa.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'm sure our listeners are going to have a very enjoyable time listening into this depth of both knowledge as well as the opportunities that exist so that they can actually tap into it. So thank you again. Wish you a very, very happy holiday and an amazing new year ahead.
My pleasure, Monica. Happy holidays to you and happy new year. Take care of yourself and hope to have more of these conversations going forward.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And thank you to everyone from FinStep for joining in.